Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're at. Want to really welcome Katie at Shopify for our next session around this digital awakening. Katie, you joined in 2015. We've worked together in your prior career. It's great to working with you again, and thank you so much for joining us on the call today.
It's my pleasure, Brent. Thanks for having me. I think yours was the last kind of investor drink I had before we all went into lockdown back in March. So this feels appropriate.
I do remember that. We were having a conversation in New York about all of what could potentially happen. And that was actually the last plane I was on in 2020. So interesting year to say the least. So listen, I think the goal of this discussion is really to kind of dive down into three areas. This is going to be an interactive event. I really appreciate any investors that have questions, lobby them in. We're going to try to group the questions around kind of three different areas. And I think that that's what makes the most amount of sense. Again, we'll make this interactive. So let me start out here as we just think about the opportunity for Shopify. Can you frame when you say a retail operating system, what's the scope of that? It's kind of a generic, has potentially all-encompassing kind of capabilities, but just when you think about the opportunity around a retail operating system, what does it encompass today? Every year you add more features, so.
Probably the best place to start when you think about that is kind of the whole supply chain of a transaction. And I'm not saying that we're going to get into manufacturing things, but when you do think about the manufacture of a good and everything it takes to get it to a retail outlet, and then what it takes for that retail outlet to find its way to a buyer who then consumes it and then actually has to dispose of it in some way. So just think very systems like around the whole circle there that accompanies commerce. And so think of it in the sort of framework of the last 150 years, how you were geo-limited as a buyer to whatever anyone made available to you. And this is since the dawn of humankind. This is the way the world has worked. And the big shift now, not a shocker here, is that the data itself can travel. There's not a need to ship goods to a certain place to go sit and wait and find buyers. You don't really have nearly as many unknowns as before when it comes to the whole distribution of goods to the world. So when you think about it really big picture like that, that's important because that's exactly what's happened to the world. Everything's being digitized. However, the systems in place for commerce are still very manual and they're still very physical because we're talking about the delivery of physical goods to people. And it's a bit of a shift of those physical goods kind of becoming digital goods. This is really apparent in realms like design and fashion, and there's a whole bunch of art. We've seen it in photography with a lot of companies that have been successful with a completely new approach. So there's really basically, when we think and talk about a commerce operating system, it is sort of a trigger to get people thinking about that entire cycle that has to do with commerce, because it's no secret that there's a heck of a lot of modernization that still has to happen, in that whole grand scheme of things. And that is what Shopify is building out. Now, I joined Shopify before we went public, and I remember the conversations about the TAM and, when you're introducing yourself to a whole brand new audience that never heard of you, Canadian company, tiny. I was employee 725. And, you need a TAM slide. You need to show people how much headroom you had. And we got so much resistance from execs on that because their vision in building out a 100-year company is that it goes so much beyond what this conventional wisdom would tell you. This is your market. It's just people who are selling goods online today, and stop there. Because I think that neglects to acknowledge that you're kind of building the market in a lot of ways, because you're making it so much easier for people to come online and start selling. So that means you're also creating the market at the same time. So when we talk about a commerce operating system, we are also talking about not just the multi-channel retail and all of the functionality that we build into the platform, from order management and inventory management and the apps and the payments, the capital. It's not just all of that. It's also just that entire chain of command, the pallet to parcel transition, and that Six River Systems is helping with, all the way through, to the delivery. So that is sort of like the scope of our imagination, but, we only get 24 hours in a day, and there's only so many people who are really good at writing software. So we're limited in other ways. But I tell you, like, this to-do list could fill up, many, many years into the future. And there's a lot of building that needs to be done.
And to maybe narrow, so you have a lot of scope relative to where you can go. Is there bounds? Are there boundaries, what you do and what you don't do? And is that defined by what you can write in software? And so it's going to be more software centric, and then everything that's not software centric, because you get a lot of the questions around what the bounds of what you're going after, because there are a lot of problems. There's a lot of challenges. And I think, SFN is one of those that people trying to understand what's the bounds of what you do in these areas. So we'll walk through just at a high level, what are the bounds and the North Star that's going to guide what you do and what you don't do, solving that commerce, problem.
That is a question that gets answered in terms of time. Like, what are you going to do when? Because if you are going to paint this picture of, the world is sort of your oyster, you can't do all of that today. So we've operated under a sort of a matrix, like, well, what makes sense to do today? Like, what is closest and what can you be good at? What do most merchants need most of the time, that 80-20 rule? And then everything else, let's share that with partners. They're going to be better at a lot of this stuff than we would be anyway. So it really makes a ton of sense to help them create value. And then that also is helping with our flywheel. So for Shopify today, here and now, we have a pretty clear picture of what we consider to be kind of core stuff. We're making money on it. We're really good at it. We're doing it well. This is sort of our platform. This is Shopify Plus. A lot of the merchant services are in that bucket because we have at least a few years history of doing those and doing those well. And so then it's okay, when we look at our roadmap and we look out in front of us, we have this next kind of swim lane, if you will, of sort of just expansion. How are you expanding? Point of sale. We just launched sort of the all new point of sale, which is a lot more representative of what we can do on the technology side. But as a software company, this is our first kind of foray into hardware, and getting that out there and getting, this is a perfect year to do that, given the switch that everybody had to make. They didn't have a choice in international. So we've gotten our feet wet with international starting in 2017, translating blogs and translating the admin. We're now at 20 languages in the admin. We have payments available in 17 countries across the globe. So localizing is hugely important to making it really work for merchants in whatever country they are. And then you've got finally at the end this whole ambition bucket where Shopify Fulfillment Network lives today. Six River Systems is in that bucket. Our Shop app is one. So if you think about all of the possibilities available to Shopify today, think about it in terms of like timeline and scope. So, people, well, could you do accounting or could you do marketing? And the way we think about it is whatever is going to help a merchant, most merchants, most of the time on Shopify, i.e. purveyors of goods. We don't optimize for services or even for restaurants. So if most merchants are going to need it most of the time, and can we be like decent enough at it that it's going to add value relative to what they could get today in the App Store? So a good example of that would be Shopify email. Plenty of email apps in the App Store. And people say, well, you do marketing. Well, we're going to do parts of marketing that are going to help a lot of people, especially the starter merchants. And that's exactly what our email does, right? So if you've never done email marketing, you're probably going to underrate it in terms of effectiveness. And so here, try it. See if you like it. This is a good way to develop that relationship with buyers who are using, who like you already, and to come back to them. And then you got some fancier bells and whistles, more sophisticated tools, also doing email that remain in the App Store, that we will leave. And look, the envelope is always being pushed forward, either by us or more often by partners. And so there's always going to be room to add value, because that is a pretty limitless circle of opportunities, and new ones are being invented all the time, right? We do have augmented reality things that we're working on, but it's a pretty small team compared to what there is out in the world. The best ideas come from everywhere. And I think our approach to this acknowledges that, lets the best ideas come in, and we kind of take them in and make them available to merchants in a way that is going to pay off quick enough for them as needs be, so they can, feel confident and move forward and grow their business.
Got a great list of investor questions. Keep them coming. I wanted to kind of just close out this kind of broader discussion, with two things. One, monetization of that opportunity. You've kind of you have this merchant solutions business. It's very fast growing. As you go and expand the scope, is it the right way to think where the bias is to monetize via merchant solutions and kind of a success-based business model? We're seeing more of the cloud companies move to transactional consumption, usage-based model. Is that the right way to think about how you're thinking about monetization? Or do you look at all of these products and say, well, this one we're going to monetize via subscription, this one we're going to monetize via merchant solutions? Just trying to understand the monetization appetite between software or more of a success-based fee.
Well, far more of a bias on the success basis of it. That's always been the way we've rolled. We've had the $29 platform in place at that price for at least the last 6 years, and even going before that. But do you know, if you were to look at Shopify today, that platform, and look at Shopify, I mean, it is a world of difference. It's crazy. This has got to be hands down like the best value in software in who knows how long, because it's still $29, yet it does so much more than it ever did before. So that right there is great evidence that we're really keen on keeping that value proposition squarely and solidly in place. We know well that disruption almost always, if not always, comes from below. So having that available as a starter package for a merchant is really important. And then the monetization of all of these pieces of value that you have the optionality to build into your platform keeps it square in the merchant's minds. So when money comes out that they're paying for, then they understand the value that they're getting, and that matching of the value proposition is really important. When you look at our point of sale software, like before, if you were on the $79 plan, that was kind of built in, and now we've started charging for it. So that's a good example of, well, a lot of people and a lot of time and money and resources went into making these features available to you, and so now we're charging for it. So yes, the bias is still to charge on the merchant solutions line, because it's also the more flexible way to do it. When you have over 1 million merchants on a platform, and some of them are like way up here, and they're massive enterprises selling tons of stuff on a daily basis. And then you've got, a friend of mine, her 13-year-old started a business on Shopify 4 months ago, and it's actually doing okay. You've got both of those users of the same software the needs are going to be really different. So you need to be able to opt into the need that's important to you, and your success as a merchant should help cover the costs of that. And we kind of think about it that way too. I mean, you need to support the costs of ongoing development and continuing to innovate. And so, so when we charge for things, that's what it's covering.
Got it. Let's shift gears. We got a backlog of investor questions. Maybe we'll kind of piece off of these as we kind of pivot now to kind of a new segment. Getting a lot of questions just around the social commerce opportunity. Obviously, you announced new relationships with WhatsApp, TikTok, YouTube, Instagram. So the question here from a client: how do you view social commerce opportunity, and how differentiated is it as a channel versus kind of peers like BigCommerce or Wix?
Well, I think everybody is trying to do this because everybody recognizes that merchants need to meet their customers wherever they are, wherever conversations are happening, or wherever you're feeling inspired and you really just need to have it. That's where it should be available. And so everybody, as we know, is spending lots more time in apps. And, we recognize this, years and years ago, which is why we started building it. So I think it's a differentiator, even though everybody else is trying to get there, for a couple of reasons. One is, if you're a merchant, like let's talk about that 13-year-old I told you about, he's going to be in completely different places, talking to people about the gamer glasses that he sells than, the Snickers bars that were made available to healthcare workers are doing it somehow different. So my point is, you're going to use different. Facebook is kind of like old school for Max's group. But, for Snickers and these groups, it makes a ton of sense. So you need to have the different ones available. And then for the merchant standpoint, they need to be able to see that converged sort of dashboard of what's doing well where. And it has to be really easy, not just to have the transaction happen, because that's relatively new. Where does the checkout happen? But just be present in all of these places. So when we talk about, we have an integration with Facebook, with Amazon, with eBay, with Pinterest, some of those have different checkouts in different places. So we've been doing work on this for a long time. We made our software development kit available to people ages ago. Walmart used it to build the channel so people could, because the Max isn't going to go list his gamer glasses on Walmart. Walmart's put in place some hurdles that you need to achieve before they'll let you list in their marketplace, because it's their checkout. You've become, the buyers are kind of their customer at that point. So having gotten ahead of that and built out the software and the APIs and things that make it easy for all of these channels to build, that is huge. I mean, that's hugely important because, like I said, we can't be all things to all people, but we can make the platform available in a way that they can build what they need. And so this goes for partners as well. And I'm not sure that that's the approach. It certainly isn't. The others in the competitive landscape haven't spent this amount of time solving these problems. Before, I think I told you I came on, I wanted to reach out to various people in Shopify. So Satish Kanwar, who I think maybe some of the people on the call have met before, feels really strongly about this, because he was the one overseeing the channel strategy ever since I joined. And so, how important of a differentiator is it? It's pretty important. Merchants are going to choose it because they want to be where their customers are, and Shopify is kind of known for this. And so not only can they get to the channel that they need because we've made it available, but they can get to all the other things that we've made available, right? They can have payments up and running really easily. They have shipping labels ready to go. They've got all the other parts of the platform. So it's important to look at all of these things together, not just what channels do you have, and because a merchant's going to choose on the basis of more than just the channel availability.
Totally makes sense and is helpful. I guess my question is it incremental? is it driving incremental revenue for some of your merchants, or is it just providing more flexibility where I was going to buy the product, I was going to buy the gamer glasses anyway, and now it's just a little bit easier for me in reducing friction? Is it too early to tell if it's a incremental, driver by having Walmart and Facebook and Pinterest for your merchants, or, hard to say?
I don't think it's hard to say at all. I mean, this multi-channel approach has been our approach for, for years, and we've done really well with it, and we've attracted a lot of merchants because of it. So, you kind of asked that question from two standpoints. One was the merchants obviously come because they want to interact with their customers. And when you're not just a third-party stocker of shelves for Amazon and you're building your own business, your number one challenge is discovery. And so you're going to try to do everything you can to get discovered wherever you can, to be in those places where the conversations are happening. So that's a massive value add. On the checkout side, it probably makes more sense for for certain items than for others, right? Where the checkout happens, because the checkouts, Shop Pay is a great example. If I were to click through an ad and go to a store and, my Shop Pay is up and running, that's a pretty frictionless checkout. But, if you're on Facebook and there's a, buy now button, and you know exactly what you want, it's not your first discovery of that merchant, then you might just go ahead and click it. So different things for different people, but I think it's pretty, I don't think there's any question that, multi-channel is pretty important to merchants. And that's how they're finding their buyers. So from the buyer's standpoint, I don't know how much they care where the checkout happens. I think it really does depend on what they're buying.
Totally makes sense. Another question from a client, I think it stemmed from this 100-year kind of vision of what you want to do, and the scope of the opportunity is big. And this has more to do with the relationship with Stripe. As you think about, the long-term ambition there, good partners of yours today, how are you thinking about that payment infrastructure? How does it evolve? How do the partnerships evolve over time? You have a new pay functionality, buy now, pay later through another partner. So how do you just think about that commerce payment, partnership, and why partner today? And will that be the case in 5 years, 10 years? Just walk us through that.
Mm-hmm. High alignment, I think, culturally and sort of philosophically between Shopify and Stripe on why is the world still set up this way when we have all the tools available to make everybody's life so much easier and more livable, and just make value go where it's meant to go, as opposed to sort of an incumbent infrastructure that sort of rent-seeky, if you will. So I think that alignment has served us so well over the years. And as far as credit card processing goes, it's been a phenomenal partnership, and we've worked very well together for a long time. But it's important to recognize, you've brought up the Affirm partnership, that, there's all kinds of other ways to pay for things now. And people are leaning in on this, and they're leaning in on it hard. Before the partnership with Affirm, we had seen, there were lots of merchants taking advantage of these tools to allow installments to happen on their platform, especially the ones that were selling bigger ticket items. So that was a pretty natural partnership to go with, sort of a really best of breed company that opts for huge transparency, no hidden costs. So that made a lot of sense for us. And it, to the degree that, we can continue moving on with Stripe, moving forward with them, we will. But I think both parties understand there's going to be room for other things. Affirm is one. Some of those local payments methods that we call out, especially in Europe, where people are using a different, more ACH debit type way of paying, where Stripe, but that doesn't work as well, and Stripe is on another partner there. They're also in the mix on the Shopify payment side of things. So that partnership is working really well for a certain set of type of payments. And then there's going to be other ones coming down the road, as you'll see. We talked, I think, earlier this year, we announced Shopify Balance. So that's another, when you think about value exchange and transitions, that's another way that merchants can be delivered even more value because if they've got a balance already, sort of because, they had a great sales month or they had a flash sale or whatever, and they have cash already on hand, they should be able to have access to that. And we can facilitate that. Why wouldn't we do it if it's going to save them money in the long run? So, I guess the takeaway is it's a phenomenal relationship, but I think we both acknowledge that there's going to be new and different and cooler ways of doing things in the future that augment the process that's already in place today.
Totally makes sense. Shifting gears to kind of this is a COVID question from a client. Timely given we've seen this digital acceleration. This is a digital awakening day that comes 2 days after the very promising news on a vaccine. So I guess the debate here and question is how much demand pull forward is driven by kind of a pandemic. And as you think about the next 6 to 9 months and a return to normal, how is that going to impact the GMV growth? And I know it's an impossible question to answer, but how are you generally thinking about that kind of eventual return to normal that we all are hoping for and look forward to having another drink with you in New York sometime in the next 2 years?
Yeah. Maybe in the spring. I don't know. We'll see. I think we think about it like, you have what happened with the Shopify, the merchant solutions take rate in a quarter is a good example. So you've just got this trend line going up, right? It's just going up and to the right. And then you've got these crazy swings around it with the trend line still obviously going up. And so all the noise from Q2 and Q3 will come back and haunt us next year in Q2 and Q3, not just from a tough comps perspective, but just from the fact that suddenly consumers, mainly in North America, but this was a global phenomenon, but I'm not sure the extent to which subsidies helped in other places. They had that. They weren't spending money on movies and concerts and travel and vacations. They couldn't. So they're spending it on stuff. They're building home gyms and all kinds of stuff. Like that's a huge spending surge that's happening now. So we're highly cognizant of the fact that that's not sustainable. That's going to come back, but we are kind of doubling down on our high conviction that some habits were formed by buyers as well as by merchants in this pandemic that are going to stick. One of them is sort of kind of online shopping for things that might be a little bit more non-discretionary in nature. I'm a pretty good test case for that. Just on some of the, we go through gallons of hand soap. It kind of kills me to keep buying these 12-ounce bottles. So, putting that on subscription and just having it just makes a ton of sense. It's not like I don't get a ton of pleasure shopping for that kind of stuff. So I think that I'm not the only one like that. So I think some of those things are going to stick around. But what we don't know are how much of disposable income is going to still go to shopping. The other thing that changed in COVID that's going to stick is that we have more non-discretionary things happening on the platform. So food, beverage, tobacco is the category that we look at like that. And so that has grown at a greater rate than the GMV on our platform has grown year over year, in part because of this phenomenon. And then finally, the local pickup, the curbside delivery feature for brick and mortar merchants, that's pretty nifty. And I think when you see the stores getting boarded up and the closures that have sort of afflicted probably every neighborhood, I think that hurts the people who live in the neighborhood. And I think they do have desire, actually, for the first time ever, to step into friction, right? So there's a couple kinds of friction to think about. One is the friction that we hate, and we remove friction in a lot of points on the process. But the other one is friction that kind of invites a bit of a challenge or something interesting. And I think that would probably be, I think I will go there. Because I know that merchant, I like that merchant, and I like all the dresses she got in or whatever. I think there might be a little bit of that going on too. The fact that we've made that feature really accessible to brick and mortar merchants is really helpful to kind of the local commerce. And they no longer have to be limited to their 9 to 5 hours, which kind of like shut out anybody who works 9 to 5, because now that they're sort of more seamlessly online and offline, that works a lot better for people who are used to doing online shopping, but also want to pick it up or exchange it in store, which the all-new point of sale allows for.
Got it. Makes sense. I guess you do have a couple offsets. There's some pretty big headwinds. What is and this is a question here on international, just as you think about, can you invest in international as a potential offset, just share gains internationally? As you think about some of those headwinds next year, how fast are you investing internationally? You talked about, I think, 20 languages now. I mean, how fast can you iterate? How fast are you pushing on that international side, which potentially is a minor offset, but could be an offset next year?
I think it's a lot less about getting sort of sales teams in the field and getting them running and getting lots of merchants on. Less about that and more about the product. We've always been kind of a product-led company. The software should stand on its own, shouldn't have to do a ton of customization. If you do need to do it, there's partners. But so I think it's going to happen at the speed of product in a lot of ways. That's where we see the uptake happen, is when we have payments in a place, and, the take rate in markets that aren't our core geographies is lower because you don't have shipping outside of North America yet. Capital we do just have in the UK, but these things are going to happen at the speed, I think, of product development. So it's not as if you could just go buy somebody or do something quick and easy. Because the product needs to feel pretty organic. And I mean, like I said, we started this a few years ago, and it's come along quite nicely. If you look at any of I think, if you look at the revenue that we've gotten from rest of world. So we talk about our core geos as English speaking geos because, for language, and also they tend to use credit cards more and everything. But rest of world was 15% last year of our revenue, which is still pretty small. There's still a lot of room to grow there, but that's a big pickup from just a couple of years before that, when it was 11% in 2017. So you see this trajectory happening where the share is moving more towards rest of world, and I think that's a natural follow on from making the product, making the platform just better and more usable in those places.
We tend to think about international expansion as like sales driven, but I forget this is really about product. It's about having the right product at the right time. Mm-hmm. It's going to motivate that merchant. So super helpful color there. A couple of questions on kind of competition, specifically with kind of big commerce. It sounds like from maybe got two or three questions from investors here. So I'll kind of lump it together. How do you differentiate versus a big commerce, different swim lane, similar swim lane? How do you see them there, and how often are you seeing them kind of in head-to-head engagements?
They don't have the same kind of merchant base as we do. It's not anywhere near the size of the merchant base, and so there hasn't been any kind of pickup in where we're seeing them. The pie is just growing really, really quickly. So it makes sense that they'd be growing, but they're still kind of growing at a fraction of our rate. So I don't think we're seeing them more. I think that their value prop really is just different. So I think the one kind of major sort of moat that we have in this regard goes back, let's use international as an example. When you have this sort of global network of even small merchants, kind of feeding, sort of your intel about what's happening, but also sort of offsetting things that are happening in different parts of the globe. If you've got an event in one country and that kind of makes things calm and slow for a week, and then you've got an event in another country that, is happening, like a Cyber Monday sale or something, that you've got, it's diversification, basically. You've got much greater diversification, which I think is really powerful in moving forward. So that scale is huge. I mean, making that scale available to somebody on a really small basis is massive. So when you have a smaller customer base or you're just out elephant hunting, you've completely sort of sacrificed the advantages of scale that have made so many companies really successful today, right? Taking scale and delivering it to a smaller company like AWS, look at Twilio, look at Stripe, look at Shopify. Like that's really, that's really powerful. And so if you don't have that, it's kind of a completely different ballgame.
Got it. That's helpful color. And in that larger enterprise kind of cohort, I know your mission is all about powering the small business, the entrepreneur, but you're getting some large businesses, and large enterprises coming to Shopify. Do you see more of a bake-off scenario in that environment, or again, are you this scale, easy to use, easy to launch? Kraft Heinz wants to sell ketchup and they do it for a small little thing and they launch you, or are you starting to see big bake-offs with big, larger enterprise kind of deployments that want to move to, a different commerce platform?
Yeah, I think there's always going to be some of those. And as we've gotten into some of the larger enterprises who want to take greater advantage of digital for the sales of goods, we've probably had more sort of bake-offy kind of things. But, you covered us when I was at EMC. It's a totally kind of different sort of ballgame. It's nothing like these multi-million-dollar deals where you've got, legions of people coming in and training you on how to do this, that, or the other and customizing the software. So there's a degree at which we really wouldn't even compete because we just don't have that. That's not that part of what we're offering to you. So the companies at plus level subscription that have come to Shopify have usually come in for the value of it. So, I would say it's probably a little more the latter, what I just talked about of the coming to us for the value, and probably fewer of the like head to head, oh, I got to win this account, kind of situation. We had record growth for the past 2 quarters of merchants coming on to Shopify Plus. And a healthy chunk of each of those quarters were just merchants on the platform who've grown up. So, let's not forget that the CAC for them was the CAC of maybe a $29 customer, and that with this sort of growth that they've seen, they've been able to grow up and take advantage of the economics that are available once you're scaled up from a GMV perspective.
Absolutely. So there's been a lot of questions on SFN that it sounds like let's probably a good pivot now to talk about that. But maybe before we go, let's talk about the logistics strategy and maybe state of the union right now in logistics, starting with maybe shipping. So maybe frame how big is shipping? What's the attach rate? It sounds like US only. How hard would it to take shipping internationally? Just walk us through state of the union on shipping today, and then we'll pivot to SFN.
So shipping is still kind of relatively small when you compare it to everything else, like from a revenue perspective, which means, there's still a ton of room for shipping to grow. So we are now also in Australia. When we talk about that pen rate of merchants for whom it's available, we're only talking about North America there. So a little over half with the last quarter, but that doesn't count the Australia where we've got a new offer with a partner. So any merchant who's coming on to the platform, being faced with, not just getting discovered and getting the sale, but getting it out the door. There's almost no reason if they qualified why they wouldn't use it. I mean, drop shipping, people use it for a reason because your skills are in the marketing and the merchandising and the finding of a buyer, and finding exactly the most awesome thing that this particular buyer would want, getting it out the door is not really a value added thing. So if you are Shopify and you can come along and you can say, hey, we've gotten, again, scale, talk about making the advantages of scale available to really small merchants. We've done that with shipping. So not only can you just leverage the address and everything you've already got in the system, but you just like print out a label and you printed it out at a rate that's far more favorable than you would do if you're walking it down to the post office. So shipping, I think it's only ever gone up since we launched it in 2016, I think. So that's kind of on track to continue to add value to mainly smaller merchants. Shipping is for self-shippers, right? So when we talk about eligible merchants, these are people who A, aren't drop shipping, or B, aren't selling a digital good. A lot of goods can be delivered digitally, or aren't using a third-party logistics provider, or aren't, which a lot of the Shopify Plus, merchants will be doing, which takes us into sort of SFN. So, unless you had anything else on shipping that you wanted to talk about.
So where are we at? How many customers have you opened it up to? Just kind of any sort of, again, questions around, readiness ahead of the big holiday season, and just any questions around maybe framing where it is today. I know it's early days, but let's frame the scope of it, and then readiness for the holiday season here, where shipping and logistics could be challenging.
Yeah, no doubt. I think that we've done a lot already to make sure that people are totally aware of that. And you have to kind of have been living under a rock if you're not aware that the shipping is going to be kind of an issue because of the inundation that a lot of the transportation providers are having to deal with now. So the way that we're kind of helping out there is just making sure that our partners. So just as a quick overview of our strategy on Shopify Fulfillment Network, last year in June, we told the world that we're going to try to tackle fulfillment, because this is a big nut to crack for merchants. The experience today could be so much better than it is. You have a lot of capacity, believe it or not, in warehouses, a whole network stretched across the United States. But those are run by partners who have limited visibility into SKU histories, or don't have the data they need to be able to predict what items need to be stored at what nodes. And so there's just a ton of improvements that could be made if the software existed to kind of have, what's going to be needed and, how can we get it to people. So building sort of that bridge is a lot of what Shopify Fulfillment Network is about. So knowing that there was a ton we didn't know, we said, this is going to take years. Like, it's going to take years before we are like scaled and rocking and rolling on this. So we've come along that trajectory kind of nicely, adding a little bit more merchants every quarter as we go. In Q2, there was a bit of a pop in the number of merchants and number of goods going out over the network because of that sort of inundation that we all felt. But everybody asks, like, well, why don't you grow faster? Like, clearly there's massive opportunity here. And the fact is, if we could grow faster, we absolutely would grow faster. But it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. It's sort of like the speed at which you can build software, and for Shopify Fulfillment Network, make it really, really, really high quality. With software, it's kind of okay to MVP something and iterate and make it better as you go. That's not really the case with fulfillment. Like, fulfillment, you have to, you're kind of responsible not just for that merchant Shopify relationship, but like the merchant buyer relationship. I mean, you are touching physical goods that are going to show up at their buyer's door. And so you have to be sure that is just locked and loaded and just near perfection. Not to mention, if you scale something that's not, almost perfect, then you're in for a lot of pain at scale. So this is kind of why the timeline is taking, like, why we've given ourselves that much time to do this.
what is the biggest challenge for SFN? Is it like the software coordination with these third-party warehouses? Do you kind of need to control the warehouse? Like what is as you think about the biggest challenge, what is that challenge that needs to be overcome?
I think it's just time. We need time to build the software. Like we've had lots of little challenges in getting a process down and getting it in really phenomenal shape to scale. An example would be the onboarding of a new merchant. That's still pretty manual today. That needs to be, a lot more automated than it has been before we can scale it to where this is going to start making money.
You can't
and adding more value to more merchants at scale.
When you had 400,000 merchants in one quarter, manually onboarding SFN probably not the best, most efficient.
Right, that's right. And I mean, if scale is our value prop, then you need to deliver scale. What was I going to say on that topic? It was I think you had asked about, do you need to build your own warehouses? And we would need to build our own warehouses if the partner network wasn't getting the job done. I think so far they've done a phenomenal job. They've done really well. Capacity is in place. We did build our own in Ottawa so we could be close to it and learn at shipping real goods. And the partners are, we have 9 nodes out there today. 4 of them are using 6 Rivers systems to just get the velocity even higher, than it could be. Those are kind of the robots that are an assistant to the warehouse worker. So I would just say, Brent, that there's a lot of work that needs to be done and a lot of things that need to be learned, and you can't really fast track learning. But that said, I think we've been very validated in our decision to go in that direction. And I think that our conviction on the need for this has really only grown.
A couple more here. I know we're kind of getting close to the end here. Appreciate your time. This is just a high level question. As you think about Shopify Plus, right? Thinking, longer term, that's next 3 to 5 years. What percentage of revenue could that Shopify Plus business become, particularly as you focus on larger, high volume kind of customers?
It's funny, we don't really think about it too much in that way. It's a tier of subscription.
Yeah.
And if you look at Shopify Plus, it's not all that different from our whole merchant base in that you still have a really small subset at a very large scale. And then you still have a ton of Shopify Plus subscriber customers that are doing much lower scale. So that's why it doesn't make a ton of sense to think about it like that. And in fact, also because really their, minimal contract value per month is still only $2,000, which yes, I get it's like 70 times the smallest one on there. So it's good, but really, the real value and the real money always, whether you're tiny or whether you're big, is going to come in from what you're able to sell. And yet Shopify Plus merchants can sell that. But, our favorite is a merchant who comes in at $29 and then grows into that level. So it's not like we're going to over index on just grabbing a bunch of Shopify Plus merchants. I mean, we'll still sell to them. We still welcome them, but.
Last question as we wrap up for you, just as you think about kind of 2021, what are you most excited about outside of the vaccine and some return to normalcy that we all are hoping for? But what are you most excited about from a Shopify perspective, thinking about next year?
I think I am really excited about how we've seen a little bit of a reversal with COVID. I know a lot of people are finding silver linings. And one of the silver linings is sort of this kind of feels like a resumption of entrepreneurship and new business startups and sort of this return to just like people's own ingenuity. And to me, we did talk about this on the call, this sort of like felt like a recent hire of new merchants coming to Shopify,
Yep.
which is great, which is cool. But to us, it's pretty exciting that sort of the world itself is kind of feels like maybe the pendulum's swinging a bit back more towards people having their own businesses and taking charge of their own destiny and getting, a lot of fulfillment from that. So I think what I am, and this is me talking, but I think, this is how Shopify feels about new business startups. We're pretty excited about it. So I think that 2021 is going to be, hopefully that will continue. And, we're right there for them if that's what happens. So pretty stoked.
Well, Katie, thank you so much. It sounds maybe like Harley's new TV show is working, inspiring all sorts of new entrepreneurs for sure. But listen, taking a lot of your time today, a lot of investors were interactive here, asking questions. Appreciate that, and thank you for sharing your thoughts on all these questions. So, as always, nice seeing you.
All right, thanks for the invitation. Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.